Before anything else, if you're watching this right now, drop your location in the comments and the current time where you are. We love seeing how far this family of storytellers reaches. And if you're new here, subscribe so you never miss a story that stays with you long after it ends. Now, let's begin. No one in the Sterling mansion could remember the last time they heard a child laugh. Not since young Aiden Sterling started spending more time in his bedroom than anywhere else. He used to be the kind of boy who ran through the hallways barefoot, giggling, sliding down the marble floors, and begging his father to chase him. But now, at just 12 years old, he walked with a limp, spoke in whispers, and carried a sadness in his eyes that was too old for a child. People said the mansion looked beautiful. Tall glass windows, gold-trimmed staircases, and gardens manicured by experts who visited twice a week. But to those who knew the truth, the entire place felt like a quiet museum of heartbreak. Because behind every perfect wall and polished surface lived a man who had lost more than he could ever admit, and a boy who had learned to hide pain behind silence. Richard Sterling, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the state, believed money could fix anything. Broken companies, declining stocks, difficult business partners. But the one thing he couldn't fix was his son's sudden illness. Aiden had gone from active and energetic to fragile within months. First, he stopped playing soccer. Then he stopped running. Then he stopped walking without help. And eventually, he needed someone to carry him up the stairs. Every doctor Richard hired said the same thing. "We're still running tests, sir. We're trying new treatments. It might be neurological." But no one gave answers. And Richard, who solved billion-dollar problems before morning coffee, found himself powerless for the first time in his life. He tried to hide it, but the fear sat behind his eyes every time he looked at his boy. He loved Aiden more than he ever said. But love didn't mean he knew how to show it. So instead of being present, he drowned himself in work and let other people fill the spaces he should have stood in. And that's where Emma came in. Emma Lopez, the young maid who had been working for the Sterlings for barely 5 months, was the only person in the mansion who truly saw Aiden. Not as a patient. Not as a fragile child. Not as the billionaire's son. But as a boy who needed someone to sit with him, listen to him, and make him feel visible. She wasn't supposed to get attached. House rules were strict. Staff were to keep interactions professional and limited. But from the first day she met Aiden, the walls she had built her entire life softened. The first morning she saw him, he was sitting alone on the staircase, one hand gripping the rail, trying to pull himself upright. No one else was around. The mansion was quiet. And when their eyes met, something in him trembled, as if he was afraid she would ignore him like everyone else did. But Emma didn't. She walked straight to him, knelt and said softly, "Want a hand?" Aiden didn't speak. But he nodded. From that day on, something unspoken connected them. Something gentle. Something rare. Emma wasn't like the other staff members who rushed through tasks or avoided trouble. She slowed down. She noticed things. The way Aiden winced when he put pressure on his left leg. The way he avoided bright rooms. The way he barely touched his food during dinner. The way he watched her with quiet trust whenever she walked into the room. He never said much, but Emma learned to understand his silences better than anyone else understood his words. One day, while dusting the library shelves, she spotted him sitting in the corner, shading a drawing in his notebook. Out of curiosity, she walked closer. It wasn't superheroes. Or rockets. Or cars. It was a picture of a boy holding someone's hand, a woman's silhouette, standing beside a large shadowy figure with a frown. Emma looked up, and Aiden quickly closed the notebook. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The drawing spoke for him. The boy missed his mother. Her name was Olivia, and she died 8 years earlier in an accident that still haunted the corners of the mansion. A framed picture of her sat in the main hall, smiling, beautiful, gentle. Aiden often passed by it and touched the glass with his fingertips, as if trying to remember the warmth of a face he barely knew. Emma never tried to replace his mother, but she gave him something he had been missing for years: presence. On a warm summer evening, after finishing her chores, Emma walked into Aiden's room to check on him before her shift ended. She found him sitting on the floor, legs stretched out, his breathing slightly strained. His notebook lay beside him. "Aiden, you okay?" He looked up, his eyes soft but tired. Then he pointed to the bed. She understood what it meant. He needed help standing up. Emma gently placed her hands under his arms, lifting him with care. But halfway through the movement, Aiden whispered something so quietly she almost missed it. Can I ask something? She froze. He rarely called her by name. He rarely initiated conversation at all. Of course, she said softly. Anything. He looked down, breathing slowly, gathering courage. Then he lifted his gaze, and for the first time in days, she saw a spark of something she hadn't seen before. Not fear. Not pain. But determination. If anything bad happens to me, his voice trembled. Will you promise to tell my dad something? Emma felt her heart stop. Aiden, why would you say that? Promise? He whispered again. Her throat tightened. She went down to her knees, leveling with him. His small hands were trembling, and she gently held them to steady him. I promise, she said. Aiden took a shaky breath. Tell him, his voice cracked and he pressed his lips together. Tell him I never hated him. Emma's eyes stung instantly. I don't hate him, he continued, swallowing hard. I just wish he stayed a little longer sometimes. Emma's heart broke in a way she wasn't prepared for. Aiden, she whispered, nothing bad is going to happen to you. But he shook his head. No. I feel it. Something is wrong. My body, it keeps getting weaker. The fear in his voice was so raw, so honest, that Emma felt a deep ache inside her chest. She held his shoulders. Look at me, she said gently. You're not alone. And your father loves you more than you realize. Aiden's eyes glistened. Then why doesn't he show it? Emma had no answer. Not one she could say without hurting him even more. That night, after helping Aiden into bed and waiting until he fell asleep, she stepped out into the hallway and leaned against the wall, covering her mouth with her hand. Aiden's request kept echoing in her mind. Tell him I never hated him. Tell him I just wanted him here. Tell him I understand. It wasn't just a request. It was a message from a child who had learned to carry pain quietly because he didn't want to bother anyone. A message a father needed to hear, before it was too late. Emma wiped her tears and inhaled deeply. She knew something was terribly wrong with Aiden's health, but she also sensed something else. Something deeper. Something hidden. The way he winced. The way he trembled. The way his condition worsened without reason. And the way Richard, despite all his wealth, seemed strangely calm, almost too calm, about the doctors failing to give answers. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening to Aiden wasn't just medical. It was connected to something bigger. Something the mansion itself had been hiding. As she turned off the hallway lights and prepared to leave for the night, she heard a faint voice from behind her. Emma? She turned. Aiden stood at the doorway, holding onto the frame for balance, his face pale but his eyes wide with quiet urgency. One more thing, he whispered. Emma rushed to him. Aiden, you should be in bed. But he shook his head and leaned closer. Don't trust everyone here. Emma felt a chill run through her body. Before she could ask what he meant, Aiden pressed a finger to his lips, a silent warning, then stepped back into the room. The door slowly closed. Emma stood frozen. Something had begun. And she had just made a promise she didn't fully understand. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Aiden Sterling's last request was only the beginning. The next morning arrived with a bright sun, but the Sterling mansion felt dimmer than usual. Emma barely slept. Aiden's words had replayed in her mind all night, like whispers she couldn't silence. Don't trust everyone here. Those 6 words carried the kind of weight no child should ever have to place on another person. And yet, Emma felt them settle on her shoulders like a responsibility she couldn't ignore. She walked into the mansion at 7 a.m. sharp, the same routine every morning. But today felt different. The air seemed heavier, the hallways quieter, and even the staff looked at her with expressions she couldn't fully read. In the kitchen, Mrs. Howard, the head maid, stood at the counter preparing breakfast trays. She was a tall woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. You're late, she said, even though Emma was right on time. No, ma'am, it's exactly 7. Mrs. Howard didn't turn around. Then you should have been here earlier. Emma swallowed her irritation. She had learned within her first week not to argue. Mrs. Howard ruled the staff with an iron stare, and no one dared challenge her. Emma helped arrange Aiden's breakfast, oatmeal, fruit slices, and a cup of tea he never finished. When she picked up the tray, she glanced toward the hallway. "Leave that," Mrs. Howard said, stopping her. "I'll take it." "But Aiden prefers when." "I said I'll take it." Emma hesitated. Something in the woman's tone felt off. Not harsh. Not strict. More like someone hiding something with force. "Yes, ma'am," she said softly. Mrs. Howard took the tray and walked out quickly, disappearing down the long corridor that led to Aiden's room. Emma's eyes followed her until she was out of sight. Why didn't she let her deliver the food today? Why the sudden insistence? Aiden's whisper echoed again. "Don't trust everyone here." The feeling in her stomach tightened. Aiden didn't come downstairs that morning. Normally, he tried, even if he needed help, to sit with the staff for breakfast. But today his chair sat empty. Richard Sterling eventually came down the stairs, dressed sharply in a dark blue suit, tie perfectly centered, as if his life wasn't slowly falling apart behind him. His expression was unreadable, the same mask he wore around board members and business partners. But when he entered the dining hall and saw the empty seat across the table, something flickered in his eyes. A mix of worry and guilt. "Where's Aiden?" he asked the staff. Mrs. Howard stepped forward. "He's resting, sir. His condition was unstable this morning. He's better lying down." Richard nodded and walked past her without another question. Another red flag. Since when did he accept answers so easily about his son's health? Since when did he stop asking questions altogether? Emma felt the tension rise in her chest. Around 10 a.m., when most of the staff were occupied, she quietly made her way down the corridor that led to Aiden's room. She knocked gently. "Aiden? It's Emma." No answer. She tried again, softer this time. Still nothing. Slowly, she turned the handle and pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. She froze. Aiden was lying in bed, eyes half closed, looking much paler than he did the night before. His breathing was slow, almost heavy. His legs were covered, but she could tell by the way his fingers twitched that he was uncomfortable. "Emma," he whispered when he saw her. She rushed to his side. "Aiden, what happened? You look worse." He shook his head weakly. "My legs feel numb." "When did it start?" "This morning, after breakfast." Emma stiffened. "Breakfast?" Mrs. Howard had brought it. Aiden's eyes flickered with the same fear she felt rising inside her. "Did you eat all of it?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Only a little. Then I got dizzy." Emma pressed a hand to her chest, trying not to let panic show. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Aiden reached up and grabbed her wrist, his grip trembling but desperate. "Don't tell anyone I said this," he whispered. "Please." "I won't," she promised. He looked toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in. "Emma, someone doesn't want me to get better." She felt her blood run cold. "Who?" she whispered. But Aiden didn't answer. He simply pointed to the small table beside his bed. Emma followed his gesture. On the table sat a small white bottle of pills. Medication. The same type he'd been taking for months. She picked up the bottle and turned it in her hands. The label looked normal. A doctor's signature. Dosage instructions. Everything looked right. But something felt wrong. She brought it closer to look again, and that's when she noticed it. The label was slightly crooked, as if it had been peeled off before, then stuck back on. Her heart dropped. "Emma," Aiden whispered, voice shaking, "don't trust." A sudden knock made both of them jump. Emma quickly put the bottle down. Mrs. Howard walked in without waiting for permission. Her eyes flicked from Emma to Aiden, then to the bottle. "What are you doing in here?" she asked sharply. "I came to check on Aiden," Emma said. "That's not your job today," Mrs. Howard snapped. "Leave." Aiden tried to sit up a little. "She's helping." "Rest," Mrs. Howard ordered, pushing him gently but firmly back. Emma watched Aiden's frightened eyes look up at the older woman. And in that moment, Emma understood. Aiden feared her. She stepped back slowly, But before leaving, she met his gaze, silently promising him she wasn't going to abandon him. Then she walked out. But as she turned down the hallway, her hands were shaking. At lunchtime, the tension only grew. Richard spent most of his time in his office, pacing and taking phone calls. Emma passed by once and heard him speaking in a low voice. "I don't care about the cost. Just fix it. My son can't get worse." Then another voice faintly replied from the phone. "We told you. The treatment can only be managed properly if—" Emma couldn't hear the rest. The door closed before she could make sense of it. But that wasn't the strange part. What concerned her more was what she found later in the laundry room. A small piece of paper lying on the floor, torn from a notebook. She almost ignored it, until she saw the handwriting. Aiden's. She picked it up with trembling fingers. 3 words were scribbled shakily on it. "Check the bottles." Emma sucked in a breath. Aiden had left her a warning. A desperate message for the only person he trusted. She didn't wait. She dashed to the storage cabinet where medication was kept. Most bottles looked untouched, except one shelf. 4 different bottles were missing their seals. One was missing entirely. Her chest tightened painfully. Aiden wasn't imagining things. Something was happening to him that no doctor could explain, because someone in the house was causing it. That evening, after dinner, Emma returned to Aiden's hallway. The door to his room was slightly open. She peeked inside. Mrs. Howard was standing beside his bed, holding a small cup. "Take this," she said firmly. Aiden looked terrified. Emma stepped inside before she could stop herself. "What are you giving him?" she asked. Mrs. Howard narrowed her eyes. "His medication. That bottle wasn't in the cabinet earlier. That's none of your concern." Aiden shook his head. "I don't want it." "You have to," Mrs. Howard insisted. "No," Emma said, stepping forward. "If he doesn't want it, don't force him." Mrs. Howard turned sharply. "You are a maid. Nothing more. You don't decide anything in this house." Emma's voice stayed calm, but her heart raced. "Then let Mr. Sterling decide. I'll call him." "No," Mrs. Howard snapped. Even Aiden flinched at her tone. "Put the cup down," Emma said firmly. For a long moment, Mrs. Howard didn't move. Then she slowly, reluctantly, set the cup on the bedside table. But before leaving the room, she leaned close to Emma's ear. "You're crossing lines you don't understand," she whispered coldly. "Leave while you still can." Then she walked out, closing the door behind her. Emma exhaled shakily. Aiden's small voice broke the silence. "I'm scared." She sat beside him and gently held his hand. "I know," she whispered. "But I'm here. And I'm going to find out what's happening to you." Aiden nodded weakly. "Thank you." She squeezed his hand. "Tell me everything you know." He took a shaky breath. "It started months ago, before you came. Some mornings I wake up and I can't feel my legs. Some days I feel dizzy. Some nights I can't breathe properly." Emma listened silently, heart sinking. "And I think," he continued, voice barely there, "I think someone here wants my dad to believe I'm getting worse." "Why would anyone do that?" "Because," Aiden swallowed. "When I'm sick he stays home. He cancels meetings. He gives people power to manage things for him." Emma's eyes widened. "Someone benefits from Richard being distracted," she whispered. Aiden nodded. "I think someone doesn't want me to get better." She felt a chill crawl up her spine. "And I think Mom knew something too, before she—" His voice cracked. Before he could finish, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Emma stood quickly. Aiden whispered urgently, "The bottles. Check them." Then he closed his eyes quickly, pretending to sleep. Emma slipped out of the room. And as she walked into the hallway, she saw someone turn the corner quickly. Someone who had been listening. A shadow. A figure. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Emma's pulse skyrocketed. This wasn't just illness. This wasn't just fear. This was a secret buried deep in the walls of the Sterling mansion. And someone inside was willing to do anything to keep it hidden. The house grew unusually quiet that night. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that makes your skin crawl. The kind that tells you someone is awake, watching, waiting for you to slip. Emma felt it immediately. Every step she took echoed through the empty corridors. Every shadow felt like it was turning its head. Every door seemed slightly open, like someone had passed through just seconds earlier. But she didn't slow down. Aiden's warning kept pushing her forward. Check the bottles. Before going into her small staff bedroom, she ducked into the supply room, turning on the dim yellow light. The shelves were stacked neatly with medicine bottles, cleaning items, gloves, and health supplies. Everything looked normal at first glance, but Emma already knew better than to trust appearances in this house. She found the medication drawer and started carefully examining each bottle. The seals on 3 bottles were fully intact, factory clean. The 4th bottle had a seal that looked like it had been peeled back and reattached. The 5th was worse. The seal wasn't just loose. It had been cut with a blade. Her pulse jumped. She picked up the tampered bottle and tilted it under the light. The label had been smoothed back on, but there was a faint air bubble trapped beneath, the kind that comes from reapplying something by hand. "What were you supposed to be?" she whispered to the bottle. Her eyes dropped to the ingredients list, a list she didn't fully understand. Long chemical names. Dosages. Warnings. Then she noticed something chilling. The prescription name on the label was typed. But the doctor's signature was wrong. The handwriting slanted differently from every other prescription Aiden had been given. It was fake. Her stomach twisted. Someone was feeding Aiden medication that didn't belong to him. Something slipped into his routine, disguised under a label that someone had forged. Before she could study it more, the light above her suddenly flickered. Then the sound of slow footsteps entered the hall outside. Emma froze. The footsteps paused directly at the supply room door. Her heartbeat pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She quickly turned off the light and stepped back into the shadows. The doorknob turned. She held her breath. The door opened halfway, just enough for a face to appear in the crack. It wasn't Mrs. Howard. It was Richard Sterling's personal assistant, Mr. Glenn, a man who had always watched the staff too closely and smiled too little. His eyes scanned the dark room, searching. "Is someone in here?" he asked quietly. Emma pressed her back against the shelf, gripping the tampered bottle tightly, praying he wouldn't see her. Mr. Glenn stepped inside fully. His shoes clicked on the floor. He looked around, checking corners, scanning shelves. Then he approached the medication drawer, the same one Emma had been using moments before. Her breath caught. He opened the drawer. He counted the bottles. He picked up the one with the cut seal. Emma's heart almost exploded. He stared at the bottle for several seconds, then muttered something under his breath. A single word she barely heard. "Not yet." He put the bottle back, closed the drawer, scanned the room one last time, then walked out. Emma waited 30 seconds, 30 long, suffocating seconds, before she finally allowed herself to breathe again. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. But she wasn't leaving until she understood exactly what it was. The next morning, Aiden looked worse. He struggled to sit upright when Emma entered his room. His neck seemed stiff, and his hands were shaking. "Did someone come in last night?" she asked softly, sitting beside him. Aiden nodded weakly. "I heard the door open in the middle of the night. Someone walked around the room. I tried to speak, but I couldn't move." Emma felt anger boiling in her chest. "You're not safe," she whispered. Aiden swallowed hard. "I know." She brushed hair from his forehead gently. "Aiden, listen to me. I found something last night. One of your medication bottles." A sharp knock interrupted her. This time, the door opened slowly, careful, cautious. Richard Sterling stepped inside. Emma stood quickly, surprised. Richard looked exhausted. His usually polished appearance was cracked by dark circles, messy hair, and eyes full of guilt and stress. "I want to talk to you both," he said quietly. Aiden looked terrified. Emma steadied her breathing. "Of course, sir." Richard sat down on the edge of Aiden's bed. His hands trembled slightly before he clasped them together. "I know you think I've been ignoring you, Aiden," he said gently. "But I haven't been. I see everything. And every day I'm scared I'm losing you." Aiden looked away. Richard turned to Emma. "You're the only one he talks to. The only one he trusts. You're the only one in this house who looks at him like he's more than an illness. Emma felt her throat tighten. I'm trying, sir, she said softly. I know, Richard whispered. And that's why I need to ask you something. He leaned forward. Do you think someone is hurting my son? Aiden's breath caught. Emma hesitated for the shortest moment. But then she remembered the crooked label, the cut seal, the midnight visitor, Aiden's fear. Yes, she said quietly. I think so. Richard closed his eyes. And for the first time since she'd met him, he looked afraid. Who? He whispered. Emma swallowed. I don't know yet. But something isn't right, and someone is tampering with his medicine. Richard slowly opened his eyes and stared at her, not with doubt, but with understanding. You saw the bottles, he said. She nodded. Richard nodded back, tears forming at the corner of his eyes. My wife, he said suddenly. Before she died, she tried to tell me something. Emma felt chills run down her arms. What did she say? She whispered. Richard's voice cracked. She told me, someone in this house wasn't who they pretended to be. Aiden's eyes widened. Mom said that? Yes, Richard whispered, staring at the far wall like the memory haunted him. But I didn't listen. I thought she was stressed or exhausted from handling the company and the house. And then she died. And everything fell apart. Emma stepped closer. Do you think her death was connected to this? Richard didn't answer, which was answer enough. Emma took a deep breath. I think we need to check every single bottle Aiden has been given. And we need to do it together. Richard nodded slowly. You're right. But Aiden's trembling voice broke in. No, he whispered. Not here. Someone might be listening. Both Emma and Richard turned to him. Aiden, what do you mean? Emma asked gently. Aiden pointed to the corner of the ceiling. Emma followed his gesture, and her stomach dropped. A black object was tucked deep into the molding. The small camera. Hidden. Well hidden. Almost invisible. Emma looked at Richard. His face turned pale. He stood up slowly, walked toward the wall, and reached up. He ripped the camera down with one hard pull. The device hit the floor. Aiden flinched. Richard stared at it for a long moment, then crushed it under his shoe. The house fell into total silence. Get your things, Richard said quietly, his voice trembling with quiet rage. Both of you. We're leaving this room. Emma froze. Where are we going? To my study, Richard said. The only room I built myself. The only room no one has ever entered without permission. And the only room in this entire house I can swear has no cameras. Aiden nodded weakly. Emma helped him out of bed. As they walked out of the room together, Emma looked back one last time, and saw something that made her blood turn to ice. Mrs. Howard stood at the end of the hallway, watching them. Her expression was blank. Too blank. Like someone who knew exactly what was going on, and wanted them to know she knew. Emma tightened her grip on Aiden's hand. Whatever they were about to uncover, it wasn't small. It wasn't harmless. It wasn't accidental. Someone inside this house had been waiting for years, quietly, patiently, for the perfect moment to strike. And now that the truth was creeping close, that person was starting to show their shadow. The sun dipped behind the sharp glass edges of Sterling Towers as evening stretched across the estate. From the outside, everything still looked perfect: polished marble floors, the landscaped garden trimmed like a magazine cover, and the long driveway glowing under warm lights. But inside that mansion, everything was shifting. For the first time in years, truth was fighting its way to the surface. Aiden Sterling sat at the edge of his bed, his back straight, hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the floor. The boy who once whispered his fears into quiet corners now looked older, heavier, as if years of emotions had suddenly come alive inside him. And standing a few steps away was Emma Lopez, hands gently folded, face calm but heart pounding like thunder in her chest. Richard Sterling wasn't home yet. And that was good. Aiden needed this moment before everything that was coming. You don't need to be afraid, Emma said softly. Aiden lifted his head. But he won't believe me, he mumbled. His voice trembled even though his spirit tried not to. He will, Emma replied. Because this time, you're not alone. There was a knock, firm but not harsh. Aiden flinched. Emma placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's okay. I'm here." The door opened slowly, and Nurse Claudia stepped inside. She wasn't wearing the fake smile Richard always praised her for. Instead, her face was pale, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with guilt and fear. "We need to talk," Claudia whispered. Aiden immediately scooted back on the bed, shoulders tense and ready to flee. Emma stepped in front of him. "What do you want?" Claudia held up both hands. "Nothing. I'm not here to hurt him." Her voice cracked. "I can't keep lying anymore." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Then start talking." Claudia took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. "The boy isn't sick. He was never sick." Aiden's breath caught in his throat. Emma's heart dropped. "What?" Emma whispered. Claudia covered her mouth as her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I should have told someone. I should have walked away. But Richard, he paid me to stay quiet. He said it was in Aiden's best interest." Emma's jaw clenched. "Best interest?" "He paralyzed his own son." Claudia shook her head rapidly. "Not paralyzed. Sedated. The injections, they weaken muscles over time. They're not permanent. That's why he still has strength left now." Tears fell freely. "But the dosage was never meant for a child. I knew it. He knew it." Aiden grabbed his stomach as if remembering every needle, every drip, every moment he felt trapped. Emma pulled him into a gentle hug, whispering calming words as he trembled. Claudia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Richard told me the truth 2 years ago. He said the world didn't need to know he had an heir. Not yet. He wanted full control of the company without board interference. As long as his son stayed fragile, no one questioned anything." Emma felt her hands shaking. "So you helped him keep Aiden weak?" Claudia nodded slowly, tears streaming. "And I regret every day of it." Before Emma could respond, a car door slammed outside, loud, sharp, decisive. Richard Sterling was home. Aiden instantly froze. Emma stood straighter, gently moving him behind her. Claudia wiped her face, trembling. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy, confident, familiar. The sound of a man who always believed everything would bow to his will. And then the door opened. Richard Sterling stepped inside, suit jacket over his arm, eyes tired but sharp as steel. He paused when he saw Claudia, then Emma, then Aiden sitting upright instead of the weak posture he expected. "What's going on?" Richard asked calmly. Too calmly. Emma didn't flinch. "We know the truth." Richard blinked once. Twice. Then the coldness returned to his face. "You've been listening to nonsense," he said, stepping inside. "Aiden needs rest. I don't want him overwhelmed." "Nonsense?" Emma shot back. She just admitted everything. Richard lifted his chin slightly. "Claudia tells stories when she's anxious. Don't take her seriously." Claudia shook her head, choking on her own breath. "Richard, I can't keep covering this up. You promised." "I promised to take care of all of you," he said sharply. "Not to watch everything burn because you can't handle pressure." Emma stepped forward. "He knows. Aiden knows everything." Richard's cold eyes shifted to his son. Aiden tried to stand but stumbled slightly, his muscles still relearning their strength. Emma caught him under the arm and helped him straighten up. "I'm not sick," Aiden whispered. Richard's eye twitched. "Aiden." "No," Aiden interrupted. For the first time, his voice didn't crumble. "I know what you did." Richard exhaled slowly and closed the door behind him. "Emma," he said softly, "leave the room." Emma didn't move. "Not happening." Richard's tone sharpened. "You're a maid. You don't have a say." "She's the only reason I'm standing," Aiden said loudly. Richard turned to him with a small smile, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Son, you don't understand." "I understand enough," Aiden snapped. "You wanted control so badly you kept me weak." Richard's jaw tightened. "Aiden, stop." Emma stepped closer to Aiden. "You don't get to silence him anymore." Richard pointed a finger at her. "You're the reason he's confused. You're feeding him lies." "He saw your pills," Emma shot back. He knows the injections weren't medicine. And Claudia confirmed it. Richard turned slowly toward Claudia. I took care of you. I protected you. And this is how you repay me. Claudia sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Richard squeezed his eyes shut. You people don't understand the pressure I'm under. Emma scoffed. Pressure? That's your excuse. Richard took a step toward Aiden. Everything I did was to protect our legacy. Aiden felt a burst of anger rise, something he hadn't felt in years. You didn't protect anything, he said. You just made me live in fear. Richard sighed and ran a hand through his hair. You were never ready to take on the world. I needed time. That's all. Time. Emma stepped forward. You robbed him of a childhood. Richard finally snapped. I gave him stability. I gave him life. You took mine. Aiden shouted. The entire room went silent. Richard stared at him, the sun he had built lies upon, and something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Fear? Or maybe realization? Before anyone could speak again, a loud voice shouted from downstairs. Mr. Sterling! Police are at the gate. Richard's face dropped. Emma's jaw fell. Claudia gasped. Aiden blinked in confusion. Police! Emma looked at Claudia. Claudia looked at Richard. Richard didn't move. Then Emma realized Claudia must have reported everything on her way home. Richard took a step back. Nobody say a word, he warned. But it was too late. Heavy boots filled the hallway outside. A knock boomed against the bedroom door. Richard Sterling, a deep voice said, Open up. We need to speak with you. Richard's hands trembled for the first time in years. Emma placed her hand gently over Aiden's. Aiden lifted his head and straightened his back. Richard looked at his son, really looked at him, and for the first time he seemed small. Like the truth had finally found him. The police opened the door, stepping aside respectfully as two officers moved in. Mr. Sterling, the officer said, we have allegations regarding medical neglect and unlawful sedation of a minor. We need you to come with us. Richard raised his hands. This is a misunderstanding. Aiden found strength, stepping forward. He did it. Richard's head snapped around. Stop. But Aiden didn't. He kept me weak, he said loudly. He controlled everything. I couldn't walk. I couldn't live. Emma found the evidence. And Claudia helped him hide it. Emma held Aiden upright as he leaned on her slightly, but his voice stayed firm. Richard's face cracked. Claudia stepped forward, head bowed. I'm ready to testify. The officer nodded. Richard looked around the room, at his pale son, the maid who stood like a shield, the nurse who finally broke her silence, and the law closing in on him. The perfect life he built collapsed in seconds. Aiden, he whispered. I did this for us. No, Aiden said softly. You did it for you. Richard Sterling, billionaire and self-made titan, lowered his head as the handcuffs clicked into place. The officers led him toward the door, and for the first time in Aiden's life, he saw his father without power, without control, without excuses. Just a man standing in the ashes of his choices. When the house fell quiet again, Aiden sank into Emma's arms. She held him, steady and warm, like a mother he never had long enough. It's over, Emma whispered. No, Aiden corrected gently. It's beginning. And in that moment, after years of silence, weakness, injections, confusion, and fear, Aiden Sterling finally felt something new. Freedom. The real kind. The kind nobody could ever take away from him again.